So we're going to completely blow this open. We've got friendly competitors here, which you don't usually see on a panel, and we're thrilled to have them all together. So welcome to our panel, The Future of AV, What's Next? I'm Cindy Davis, contributing editor to AV Technology magazine. So just in the past 3 years, the AV industry has seen more significant changes than probably in the past 30. And I'm sure you've all been feeling that. Most agree that the AV IT transition is still in its infancy. So with us here today are thought leaders from companies that are leading these evolutionary and revolutionary changes. So we have Paul Harris, CEO and CTO of Aurora Multimedia, Chris Fitzsimmons, product manager for video products at Biamp Systems, Dan Jackson, director of enterprise technology at Crestron, Tom Jones, technology consultant at Ingram Micro, and Vanessa Jensen, senior market development specialist at Shure. So our goal of this panel is not for anybody to talk about their solutions, but really to talk about what they see as the future challenges today, because we can't ignore the challenges that we're having today, as well as where's it all going. I'm going to try to get a couple of polling questions in here. Also, I'm going to switch to our screen to, if you have a question, text it in through the app, through the crowdsource app, and it'll show up here. So we'll get some questions going. You'll be able to see it in our panelists will be able to see it here, because I want this to be very interactive. And I think we'll probably be okay with that. So Paul, what do you think? What are the challenges today? And where do you see this going?
Okay, so the first challenge we have is trying to define a standard going forward. So you're seeing the beginning of emergent technologies trying to fight for their positioning to become a standard. So in the 10 gig arena, we have SDVoE. They created a consortium, and we're going to obviously see where that goes. You have Dante, who's now introduced Dante Video. And those are, for now, the two main players trying to feed into that, other than your usual compression standards of H.264, H.265, the typical JPEG 2000, and so on. What you're really going to see is other technologies. You got HD-based-T working on HD-based-T IP. So right now, it's more of a who's going to become the popular kid on the block, because ultimately that's what determines who's going to become the next standard. It's not really so much are you part of an organization, it's how many people use it of the majority of the market, which is what determines what a standard's going to eventually become for the majority of the market. So that's part of it right there. The other part that we're looking at is understanding what really works for the market as a whole. So most people will say, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. Yeah, we get all that nonsense. The reality of it is you need to cover all the gamuts from your 10-100 all the way up to your 10 gig and even beyond the 10 gig, because they all have a reason for their existence. 10-100, H.264, H.265, you're going to record stuff with that. You're going to send it halfway around the world. A 1 gig, that nice in-between medium, which gives you a good high-quality image, visually lossless, with a low latency. Then you get into the higher-end spectrum, where there's no latency, image perfection, which gets more into the 10 gig, but will be limited up until the 4K 6444 when you eventually see the 8K kick in at some point or another, or the 4K 120, which I think a lot of people overlook the benefits of the 4K 120 and virtual reality. So when HDMI 2.1 comes about, it's not so much just about the 8K. People are forgetting that there is a 4K 120 in the mix there, which has a whole other application set all on its own. So you're going to see that evolution as well. And then for us, what I believe is going to happen is a hybridization, which is the combining of technologies, where the usage of many technologies in one is going to basically further the capabilities as a whole. So for example, a lot of people will say, well, HD-based T, that's a Band-Aid fix that's on its way out. That's actually very wrong. Their next generation chipsets open up uncompressed 4K 6444. So whereas right now, even on 10 gig solution, you have to do a 1.3 to 1 compression, which is still lossless compression, and it's a perfect image quality. They've managed to get 16 gigabits through 100 meters of regular Cat 6A cable. Quite impressive. So while it is kind of not an IP technology, within the room itself, it's a plug-and-play technology, but there's nothing stopping you from bridging that into an IP. So this way, the rooms are done locally, still in the HD-based T, delivering the optimal quality and lowest latency possible, but yet bridging and simplifying the rooms across the network itself. That lowers the overall network IP addressing and also simplifies the overall networking costs because you have smaller switches. Anyway,
Hey.
I'm looking at my time.
Ah, you are.
See,
I'm
paying attention to that.
You are
See that?
amazing. So, Dan, actually, I'd like to bring you in on this. And what are the challenges that you're seeing in the transition right now?
So I think the two biggest issues in the industry are scale, number one, which is great because it means there's a huge amount of demand out there. So it's great for our industry that everybody wants technology. You don't walk into a customer and says, the newfangled technology stuff, I don't want any of it. The demand is massive, and so there's this demand to scale up. 10 years ago, you might do 10 rooms at $100,000 a piece. Now they're trying to do 100 rooms at $5,000 a piece, right, or more. So the scale has gone down within each room. They're looking for simpler solutions within the room, but the total budget for AV and for technology in general is absolutely going through the roof because you can do so much more with it, right? Before, if you wanted to do a video conference, this room could talk to that room over there, and oh yeah, Chicago had a site over there, and that was all it can do with what's happening in unified communications. You can talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere, very simply. And that's a huge, huge set of demand for that type of capabilities. What do people want? They want FaceTime, but in the corporate environment. It's a very simple set of asks. Of course, there's a lot of complexity to deliver that solution, but really this challenge is about how we scale up. How do we actually deploy more rooms without having to send the smart, guy that everybody has in the back room? They can't physically get to every room anymore. We can't treat building systems like that. How do we actually deploy things en masse? And sort of the number two to that is security. I think in the AV industry, we've really sort of punted on the security question for a long time. You have some customers that demanded security for a while, and most of them didn't. They say, I put it on a separate network and it's segmented and I call it secure and that's good enough. That's no longer good enough. We are now, as an industry, I think really feeling the heat. People are realizing that these are IoT devices and they're connected. And when these hacks start proliferating in other industries, everybody starts to look at our industry as well, right?
Yeah.
Even though there hasn't really been any big hack in the AV industry or anything yet, there's been plenty of them in other places. And everybody's sort of looking at us with a very fine-tooth comb now. Mm-hmm. So really, yeah, I think the top two challenges is scale and security.
Yeah. Chris, you wanted to build off that?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like just one more to sprinkle on the top of that. I think it plays into what Paul and Dan have both said, and that's it's just the user experience. Like Paul rightly points out, there's a massive plethora of different technologies available and a lot of competition for attention on which is better or which is better for this use case or that use case. And the net of that, and Dan's kind of scale comment, the net of that is actually making it sane to deploy. And like you said, you don't want to have to send the smart guy in every time. He's expensive. There's only a few of them in your integration company or in your end user. How on earth do we make this stuff understandable to a wider range of integration partners and installation partners? Because the only way that we're going to, as vendors, deliver satisfactory results to our AV customers, to our enterprise customers, is by making this stuff deployable enough that you get it right the first time and you don't screw it up and you don't get called back because this didn't work or this network is configured wrong or this VLAN is backwards. We have to do a better job as vendors of solving the usability problem, because otherwise we can have all the secure, cool-looking content in the world, but if the experience of it is it didn't work first time and my users are frustrated, then it was a waste of time. It was a lot of waste of money. All of these technology managers, all of you guys are judged now on, as far as I'm aware, is this stuff working? Is it available? Is this room available for use? And are my room users getting the experience they expect out of it? That's the metric that CIOs judge technology managers on, is am I getting back roughly what I paid for? And if I'm not, then pull it all out and give me that HTTP stuff back, because it worked and it did what I wanted it to do and it did it at a reasonable price.
Great. So, Vanessa, what are you seeing challenges?
I think when devices go in that are on a network, regardless of what standard they may be on, there needs to be some sort of procedure or policy in place for decision making as it relates to, what products am I putting on my network? Are they secure? Yes. But what does the day-to-day look like? What does software updates look like? How quickly is technology continuing to update, and when do I need to kind of phase out that technology and look at new sources in the room? Things are changing very quickly, I think, and I'm seeing the IT kind of realm lean on the AV, colleagues to kind of understand that a little bit, and we're still all trying to keep up with as things change.
Yeah. So, Tom, your perspective from Ingram Micro.
So I think I occupy a unique space being a distributor. So I get to see what the vendors' pains are, what the end users' pains are, what the resellers' pains are. So just looking down the line, I would say the convergence of all of these technologies and pain points are going to be the master pain point. So the convergence of all of these things. So from an operator's viewpoint, how do I make a room nimbler, smarter, more intelligent, while looking at things like security, right? Security is a huge area of opportunity today. To one of your points, it hasn't attacked the AV space, but it's on the cusp. It's extraordinarily close. When you look at opportunities that hackers have taken overseas, where they just take over billboards and put random messages on it doesn't take an Einstein to know that's eventually going to gravitate its way towards the U.S. So security and the proliferation of all of these technologies converging at such a rapid pace, that's going to be a massive pain point. How do people keep up? I mean, I heard today from architects that were in the building, hey, can you speak English for the most part, right? How do I take all this information and translate it? It's just happening at such a systemic rate. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Vendors are always making more bells and whistles and advancing in technology. End users are always driving the demand.
Great. Well, I'm actually going to take a minute to do a poll. So, Chris, if we could get the screen back up, get your phones ready, and let's see if I do this right. Alrighty. Start poll. Can you guys see that question? So it is, have you completed an AV over IP deployment? Yes or no? So if I could just give everyone a minute or so to get the app going and answer, that would be wonderful, and you'll see it pretty quickly. And I'll be asking some really interesting follow-up questions to this right after. I promise. Everybody got a chance? Great. Alrighty, I'm going to end this poll. Pretty good. 70% have actually completed an AV over IP deployment. Oh, we going down? 69%. All right, I'll give you a half a second more. Okay, come on, push those completed. Great. Alrighty, we're ending now. Great. So share results. That's here. 71% have completed an AVI over IP deployment, and 29% have not yet. All right. So. We've got some questions coming in, but and I know Dan's dying to follow up. Go ahead.
So AV over IP, I don't think anybody on this panel at least would debate that that's just going to be what people do in 5 years. I think the question is what that transition looks like. I mean, the reality is we actually sold more HD-based T-ports than we ever have last year. So there's a huge demand still for HD-based T, right? You know, AV over IP is sort of complementary, and at some point it will start to take it over. But AV over IP to me just enables so many new use cases. We haven't come up with all of those use cases yet, right? The technology is ahead of where our thought process is. You know, I came from a world of being a system designer, and you know, you're always sort of fitting things to within the format of a matrix switch, and you got to make some judgment calls about what size and where it goes and those things, and where how the physical wiring comes in. In the world of AV over IP, you have none of those limitations, you know, especially if you have a solution that can run on existing infrastructure. So once you have that, what do you want to do? It's very freeform. What do you want to do? And you can then accomplish it. And so we've seen deployments where, you know, we had a video game developer that instead of having their consoles scattered around for developers all over the floors, they built a console farm, kind of like a codec farm in the basement, and all their developers had receivers behind each of their displays. And they could just bring up a console. You want to bring up a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox, whatever you want. You could then develop your game and play it on that console at your desk. That is not a use case I would have ever thought of in 100 years, but we enabled it, right? So there's a million things out there like that where we can then, you know, sort of bring our technology to accomplish really interesting things. And to me, that's the most exciting thing about AV over IP.
So I'm actually surprised, given the number of interviews that we do at the magazine, that the percentage was so high, and maybe we've just got a really amazing audience, which I know we do, for completing AV over IP. What's your experiences for your clients, your end users, your integrators? How far along are you? What's your impression of how far along? I can actually, Tom, if you could answer.
I think some of our more advanced resellers are embracing it because they understand that's where the future is going, right? It's no longer in the traditional sense. It's going to be over IP, that's it. We see some lag from traditional IT individuals as they may not necessarily want to learn AV. But if you look at core AV customers, they're beginning to adopt it, but it's a little slower because they don't necessarily have an IT background. Right, so they have to get familiar with switches, topographies. How do I enable multicast? And relatively simple concepts that IT individuals should know, but AV guys don't know. So I'm seeing there's a drag, but it's absolutely happening. We're getting, so when I poll tech support, there's absolutely more calls coming in about it. Vendors are putting it on their roadmaps.
Were those results in line with what you're seeing with your end users?
I'd say it's closer to 60-40. And again, if I look at the bigger, larger organizations like the diversifieds, AVI, SPLs, they've already got it, right? Because they've got the infrastructure to hire the right people that understand the technologies. But if we look at SMB, if we look at the S and the M in SMB, those are the ones that are lagging because they don't have the education or the manpower or the staff to actually go out and learn the technologies.
Yeah. Vanessa, I know, you know, you've got a lot of products that are AV over IP. How has that transition been, and are you seeing more of your products? I know you've got a lot of them, but are people transitioning out? Are those percentages in line with what you're seeing?
I'm actually seeing.
Check Vanessa needs a mic.
I'm good? Okay. I'm actually seeing more and more AV over IP all the time. I very rarely, I do get requests and I do hear for traditional kind of AV equipment from customers, from clients, from end users and integrators, but predominantly, yes, that's what we offer. That's what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And I'm seeing there is still a learning curve related to that. We have a tech support team that is always available, and we kind of pride ourselves on that, as do everyone here that's sitting up here with us. But I feel like we try to kind of extend that support, as everybody should, as we kind of go through this learning curve together. And as this sort of expands more and more, we'll find more and more things on the network.
Mm.
Yeah.
I actually want to go to my next poll question because I think it's going to spur some additional conversation. So if we go to the screen. Ready for this one? All right. How has for those of you who have done an AVI over IP deployment, how has the result met your expectations? So first, top to bottom, chaos, still working out the kinks, bumpy but going pretty well, really happy we did it, smooth, not going back. So take a couple of minutes and let's see where you guys are at. Everybody get a chance? Alrighty, this is pretty interesting. Okay, all right. The bumpy, but going pretty well. They're inching up there. Okay, we're counting down. 3, 2, 1. Closing the poll. Sharing the results. So, this is actually pretty promising. The majority of you say it's bumpy, but going pretty well. Only 6% say that it's utter chaos, which is very good for all these folks up here. And still working out the kinks, absolutely. Really happy we did it. Almost a full 25%. And smooth, not looking back, 9% of you. So I'd love to get, just open it up and get your comments on this.
I'll bite. That's actually interesting. That's better than I anticipated, I think. I had another point that I was going to make earlier, and I think that this kind of bears that out. If you look at, as a product manager, I look at technology adoption. That's kind of what we do. That's how we plan what we're going to develop and how we're going to plan product, and when we think the market's ready to announce it. And I really feel like specifically video over IP is really, really early in what we call a hockey stick, right? You kind of come in flat, and then at some point there's an inflection point, and it goes pretty steeply up for a while, and then you get this smoothing and a tail, right? So HD-based T is well in that maturity phase of steadily cruising down slowly, but it's still doing pretty well. Like to Dan's point, they're selling a ton of traditional DM right now. But when you're in that uncomfortable adoption phase, this is the kind of thing you expect, and actually slightly worse, right? You don't expect first-generation adoption of new technology to be really happy we did it or smooth. That's just not how it goes, right? Vendors haven't figured all the kinks out. You guys haven't figured out how to adopt it yet, so I'm not actually that shocked by this at all. Bumpy but going pretty well is probably not the ringing endorsement that we all wanted of our product, but that's just the way it is, right? It's new for everyone, and it's challenging. So we have to figure out how to do it, to support it, to deploy it. You guys have to figure out how to help your users with it, and I think that's pretty much expected.
So Paul, what do you? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll take 30 seconds. We'll go ahead.
Okay.
So, this happened with the analog to digital transition, right? We led that about 10 years ago, right? And it was, I guarantee you, it probably looked about the same. But, everybody sort of knew, like, VGA is not staying around forever. You got to go digital. It is. It's still here. Yeah. Right, it is. A little bit. But, when analog went from, 5-wire to putting analog over Cat5, you had that too, right? So every time there's a leap in technology, it just, there's going to be some churn because your next project wasn't the exact, stamp out of your last project. But, this is how we move forward as an industry. So this is, to me, it's a great sign that we're this far. And I think if we don't slide backwards, right, the road ahead is pretty good.
Paul.
So I think the key thing when you look at these statistics is to identify what is making it a bumpy road. And one of the things that we've actually identified which causes the majority of the problems is the understanding of the network switch, as well as the way the network switches interface as they grow larger through the uplinks. And that's where we see a majority of the problems occurring. Most of the AV over IP boxes are pretty straightforward. Once a box works, for the most part, whether you have 1 or 1,000 boxes, they all don't know that the other one even exists. For the most part, the network switch is really handling a lot of the traffic that goes on. And a lot of AV integrators don't always have the expertise for these network switches. And to make matters worse, there's so many different brands out there of network switches, and they have their own ways of setting it up, and they also have their own set of bugs. We recently did an install where they were using a Cisco switch. And what happened was it went very well. Customer probably fell into the really happy we did it. And then we had another customer do it, same exact Cisco switch, same exact, pretty close to the same install, and they'd probably be more in the bumpy but going pretty well, maybe even still working out the kinks. And what went wrong on that job was there was a new firmware in that Cisco switch. And the way we got it working was we had to down rev them, and then the stuff started working again. So one of the problems that I think a lot of people are experiencing versus the HD-based T is with HD-based T, even though in some degrees when you buy it from a manufacturer, it's somewhat proprietary with all their equipment when you buy it, even though, yeah, there's an interoperability to some degree. What happens with AV over IP is there's too many moving pieces now, and some that you don't have control over because the customer is demanding a different brand or a specific brand that you may not want to use, or they want to tie it into their network, and they're adding in these nuances that just you never had to deal with before, and they don't know how to understand to just use a network switch as a matrix. And I think that's one of the key things to do is to start teaching them that the network products do not have to be on their network. You can treat the network switch as a matrix and pick the one that you like and use it over and over again to get repeatable results. And that's where you're going to see these statistics going properly in the right direction, is identifying what I just talked about.
I mean, so I was going to say, it's a different technology, it's a different tool set, right? A different skill set. I actually have a friend who, bought an AV over IP system, and the integrator actually drop shipped to their location. His team had the whole AV over IP thing up and running before the integrator even showed up to do anything. Why? Because they're IT technology folks, and they just wanted to go play with the boxes before they even got put in. So if you have somebody that understands networking, it's very smooth. It really is. I think, we as an industry just have to sort of bite that bullet, and it is a very large bullet to gain that networking knowledge. But again, if we're all up here saying 5 years from now, this is just what you're going to be doing, you kind of have to bite that bullet, right? If you don't bite that bullet, your competitor is, and they're going to be able to be much more successful in this new world. Mm-hmm. We as vendors had to do a whole lot of internal training ourselves to develop these products. It's just sort of the nature of what it is.
I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I agree with a lot of it, but I'm going to disagree with one part of it, and because I've seen it happen on so many jobs. You could put an IT expert out there, but the switches are firmware-based. They change models like anything else. And I don't care how good of a network switch person you are, if they introduce a new problem and then you bring out the boxes, okay, fine, you set the switch up the way it's supposed to be. Now you put your boxes out there and they don't work, just as the example I gave before with the firmware rev. Doesn't matter how well you set it up. At the end of the day, you're now in crisis mode dealing with why is this not working. And granted, doing mock setups before you go out into the field, without a doubt, is always the best thing to do. It prevents it from finding out the hard way once you get out there. But I do like repeatability. You find the brand or particular models you like, note the firmware you use, keep repeating it. And that's really what the industry needs, is this repeatability and knowing what you're working with before you actually go out into the field for some new unknowns. Even though you may set things up right, they don't always work right. And I think that's really, like I said, what's driving some of these statistics where they're not getting the satisfaction that they're seeing right now.
Great. Thanks. Yes, Tom?
Yeah, just really briefly, what I'd say is that also vendors are listening more to the industry in this particular case. So your Cisco's, they have teams that are going to be dedicated just for this IP, video over IP industry. So what I'm seeing is that they're very receptive and they're quick to fix issues. So that plays into longer term, the usability. If somebody's willing to listen and learn and understand from a vendor standpoint, the products that come out to the field and the market are just that much simpler. But what I am seeing longer term is that resellers are following relatively simple, straightforward directions if they have an IT person on staff, and if they follow directions and go with the recommended solutions, that data doesn't surprise me.
Vanessa?
I think making products smarter as vendors or manufacturers, we should be looking to make things more automatic. Yes, we should be collaborating with the Cisco's of the world and maybe ensuring that, our products are handshaking appropriately, but we should also be, I think, looking at making things work out of the box automatically, and maybe there's an auto configure button or something like this, that would be possible in the future to really give people that are frustrated, to take that concern away, where they walk into the room, everything's set up, not eliminating the need for an integrator, but really kind of giving the integrator the tools to kind of set that product up in a quicker and easier way, and therefore, kind of giving a solution that will work regardless of the application.
I just want to respond. I totally agree with you on that, and I just wanted to point out for those of you who don't know, and it's giving a manufacturer plug, but Netgear actually has started doing just that with their SDVOE switches. They now have the buttons for the configuration, so out of the box, it's delivering on the Dante setups, it's delivering on the SDVOE setups. So some of the manufacturers have already started to do that, and it does make a better experience.
Alrighty, so security, obviously, big issue. And so you can probably see this here, but security is the first and foremost with everything, and manufacturers need to come to the table with security industry certifications and pen testing in hand. So how do you respond to that?
Well, so Sean, I agree. I like the sentiment. The problem, and part of my responsibility at Biamp is on our response to security questions as a product manager. I have to own that feature set in our products. One of the hardest things that we come up against is it doesn't matter which certificate I show up with at your office, you'll want the other one. Or I'll have got pen tested by XYZ, and you say, no, we want to use this one. And so I'm not sure that security industry certification or a particular pen test result in hand is the answer. It's more like a willingness to engage with whatever set of processes that your industry or your enterprise wants to run, because I've yet to find certainly in the enterprise space, two enterprises that have the same expectations and requirements. Now, yeah, having a pen test done and coming with my cert shows that I'm willing and I even understand what you're asking for, but it isn't going to get me through your white hat program or whatever it is, whatever torture chamber you want to send my product through. So I applaud the sentiment. I agree that we all need to up our game in terms of compliance and security certification, but there is no single silver bullet that satisfies every bank or government institution or law firm. They all have, very rightly, their own set of policies and expectations, and we just have to be flexible enough to listen and be good partners.
So I'll say, we address security all the time, and typically it goes the other way. Every major organization you walk into will have a list of security questions. They just have a standard security questionnaire. Everybody from Microsoft to Cisco to us fills out, and it comes back to us. We fill it out, and as long as you have the right answers to those questions, which I've yet to find one that we haven't, you're good to go, right? But it's not just a list of certifications. You have to have them, but it's more of a conversation rather than just coming with a specific thing, because it has to do with, how you handle privacy practices and other things too that are beyond just a certificate. It's about how your organization is set up to handle security. If we did have a vulnerability, how do we disclose that vulnerability? How do you sign up for those updates? How do you deploy those updates across your enterprise? The questions go on because obviously security is so serious.
Yeah, great. Sure.
I'm going to give actually a nice little simple tip for security that works better than any other practice, and that is to, for example, if you're using a 10 gig solution as an example, that's not going to make it out onto the internet. You're just electrically immune just by its bandwidth to never making it outside the building. Sometimes you can create your own security by just the technology itself. Even with the 1 gig solution, if you only connect up a 10/100 connection back into the control part of it, they can never get the video out of your system. So you can actually do very simple things to protect an installation without going nuts on special algorithms and encryption, just by simply limiting and throttling what bandwidth can ever make it to the next section of the network itself.
I'm just I disagree. I'll leave it at that.
In that case, I understand the disagreement, but in what world can a 10 gig make it over an internet connection? It's never going to happen. So you can't reform the information at all. It's an impossibility. So unless something's happened that I'm not aware of in the industry, I just don't see how that wouldn't be a viable methodology in addition to the other practices.
All right, we've got another question. We've got several questions here, so I want to be able to try to get to more. Thoughts around a standard that can manage all AV devices regardless of the manufacturer. Think about managing firmware updates. And I'm feeling just about everybody here. Vanessa?
Yeah, let's do it. That sounds good.
Yeah?
Sign me up.
Preach it.
I think that's a great thought, and it's a great idea. If we could all sort of get together, the Ciscos of the world and everybody that's creating the devices or the endpoints or the individual components that are required for these types of systems. I think that could be wonderful. I know internally, each of these companies up here, we all kind of have our own standard for deploying firmware updates, sending notifications via email, and in a larger environment, this can be really cumbersome to deploy firmware updates as needed, and that ties directly back into security. So I think, yeah, let's see how we can address this, but it's definitely a need in the market. I definitely see
Tom,
that.
I think it would make your company a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I'd concur. So on top of that, I see it as an opportunity for managed service at this point, right? So HP had a similar platform that would manage all of their HP Jet Direct solutions. Could it be applicable in our world? One day, right? But I think right now it's almost the Wild West when it comes to this. It's an outstanding opportunity for somebody to look at a managed service if they're willing to take on the legwork. But absolutely, it's a gotta have eventually. I think it's a gotta have. You're gonna have to think about manufacturing collectively,
Yep.
right? And have some almost an ANSI standard around certain aspects.
So Chris next, and we'll go to Dan.
I agree too. I think, and while it sounds like challenging from a vendor point of view, I don't think it is. The reality is that we, Paul and Dan and I, don't, and everybody else, we don't compete on how we update firmware, right? Our unique capabilities as product vendors is not derived from the way that you manage our stuff. It really should be about how it performs and how it meets customer needs. So it's actually expensive for us to all maintain our own little control protocols and our own little firmware updates. We have, I'm not going to get into specifics, we have a product now that allows you to use a REST API to communicate to our stuff. That's an open communication method. And I really feel like we're all going to end up in that direction, because spending our engineering resources and time and money on developing and maintaining kind of unique control protocols and stuff is a waste of resources in my mind. We could be doing more interesting things with that, like making AV over IP easier, instead of futzing with how do I update my firmware, or what command string reboots this device versus Paul's device versus Dan's device. It's very well for me to say that. It's a much harder thing for us to move the boat and make that happen in our organizations. But as leaders and product managers, we have that authority should we choose to exercise it.
Right, Dan, did you have a follow-up?
So my snarky answer would be, if you buy from all one manufacturer, problem solved. But honestly, we're working on some things internally. Within Crestron, we are building a structure that's much more API driven, right? So you can plug in different things, right? Instead of having it all be, I won't call it proprietary, but a specific thing. When you have something that's API driven and SDK driven, we have ways to be able to plug in, these type of control protocols with other manufacturers and create something that's more like a standard. And so we are working on those things to drive this, because yes, this is something that is just so basic. We need to do it.
Mm-hmm. But I'd like to say, yeah. First off, I agree with everything Keith said over here. So except I just don't have the cool accent like he does. As far as the other element, it's great what Crestron's doing. I just don't like the proprietary element of it. The whole point of this is that it works with everybody's. So I'm a big proponent of making everything open. So that goes back to the REST, which is what he's talking about, which is what Aurora is also doing going forward as well. That's why I kind of like his answer.
Great.
And the accent, too.
So, well, you can't beat the accent. Don't forget you've got your microphone. We've got one. Great. Alrighty, I'm going to hand it over to Brandon, I think. Yes. Brandon, go right ahead.
How you doing? I was just wondering, as the adoption of AV over IP increases, are you guys seeing more low-res solutions or more high-res solutions? And is there a need for more sophisticated bandwidth control, or people want plug-and-play solutions?
When you say low res versus high res, you mean like 2K versus 4K sort of thing?
Yes, yeah.
So I'll tell you, even today, about 50% of the solutions we sell are 2K-based solutions, right? We can all talk about how 4K is the coolest thing on the planet. In the end, there's a lot of people that just don't care, right? They probably can't even tell the difference between 720p and 1080p. So there is certainly that market, but there's always going to be the market for the higher-end solutions as well. And the second that 8K becomes a reality, I guarantee you we're all going to be fighting over 8K. But the majority of the market today is really still 2K and 4K, and I would say it's probably about 50-50 at this point. Most people don't necessarily care about 4K today, but when you're building a solution that's going to last 5, 7, 10 years like we do, I think most people have an expectation that it needs to be 4K because that things are going that direction, right? You're going to start needing that resolution.
Paul's dying. Go ahead. Okay.
No, I'm going to answer that just fine.
So I have a question that I'd like just a very short answer from each of you. So whether it's AVI team managers or integrators, they're planning for the next 3 years. They're looking to potentially rip and replace right now. What do you tell them? What's the answer there?
Now that one I can definitely answer on.
Well,
I
not
tell them
proprietary.
focus on infrastructure first and foremost. That's the key to the kingdom. Boxes come and go, standards come and go, but infrastructure, that's where the expense is at, and that's what you're pulling at first. That's the main thing that's going to drive everything. Are you going to use Cat 6A cable? Are you going to throw fiber in there? Is it going to be OM3, OM4? Are you going to prepare for 10 gig, 40 gig? What are you going to do? If you don't plan for the infrastructure, it doesn't matter what you do after that for the future. Because the reality of it is right now, 8K is eventually going to come. You don't even have an HDMI 2.1 chip even shipping now. So, and they barely got the 4K ones to just start working well for the most part. So I know some people think it's coming soon. No, you're talking a decade away. It's a while away for 8K to be practical. But the point is, if you ever do want to get there, okay, fine, you buy the boxes for the 1080p or for the 4K, whatever you need now, but at least your infrastructure, you can eventually, in those 5 to 10 years, swap the boxes out. You got the bandwidth available to move on to the next technology, and life is good. Me, I'm a big fan of fiber. I wish more people would install it, and I'm trying to get fiber accompanied with power so that we can do, a more plug-and-play solution, delivering it like a PoE.
Chris?
I think a lot of what Paul said is absolutely right. I would just also implore you to skill up. Like, plan your infrastructure, but plan your team, plan your whatever it is, an HR roadmap. I don't know what the word is, but think about if you're going to deploy 10 gig fiber or 40 gig or whatever you're going to do, think about making sure that you fill your teams with people that are able to understand how that's going to work now and who are equipped to keep pace with what's going to happen. And you need to be able to deal with the unexpected, right? We're all going to sit here and we think this is going to happen in the next 3 or 5 years. We probably all have roadmaps for 3 years. None of us can tell you what's going to happen in 5 to 10. And you need to find the skill sets and the individuals to staff your teams with that are going to help you with those kind of questions, because you're on your own in terms of figuring that out as enterprises and as AV integrators. You're going to have to figure it out. And the only way to do that is with the right people.
Great. Dan?
I would say everybody should be setting up their organization to scale. Honestly, the cost of the rooms is dropping. I hope everybody sees that. We see that day in and day out. The number of rooms you need to touch goes up dramatically. We see that day in and day out. And if you're still, trying to design your organization based around a few key personnel that have to be involved at every step, you're not set up to scale. If you are setting up your organization to remotely deploy things, monitor things, everybody's talking about managed services. I think we're doing about this much of it so far, but it's obviously a key area that everybody's focused on. So, as an integrator in this space, even as a technology manager, right, you should be focused on how to scale up your organization. And it doesn't mean just adding more people, right? It means utilizing your people better, setting up your organization better, because, again, the costs are coming down per room. We can't expect that we're going to be able to bill the rates we bill and keep adding the amount of complexity we add to each room. We see it as our vendor solutions get more all-in-one and simpler, the cost per room comes down, but you got to touch that many more. So I see a huge amount of growth there.
Tom?
A few things jump to mind. So one, nimble but robust infrastructure. right? Because that's never going to go out of style. You have to have the pipes in order to deliver the data. Security, which is going to be an ongoing threat in my opinion. So you have to keep your eye on security and plan with user experience in mind. So user experience, I don't think we really touched on a lot, but just the simple things like being able to connect simply, having it secure, having CEO connect buttons. That means something that CEO who has no idea how to use the technology, come in, hit a button, and connect. That plays in the user experience. That goes a long way in project rollouts.
Great, thanks. Vanessa?
I agree with what everybody said. I think infrastructure is extremely important, paying attention to security and creating products that are automatic, they're user-friendly, and they work out of the box. I would also urge everyone to kind of consider, once you have the team in place that has the right training and the right skill set, to consider standards, consider creating your own standards as an organization, and kind of defining that out so that the whole organization can kind of follow that through the entire, pipeline.
Great, thanks. We've actually do have many more questions that you know these folks. Hopefully you'll be able to get to talk to them tomorrow, next day. And I think we actually answered a lot of the questions that were coming up already here. So I would really love to thank my panel.